Hello there, Kentucky Keepers. This is Blake Newton from UK Entomology, and this is another one of our modules talking about the Kentucky Keepers Invasive Species Monitoring and Education Program. And in this talk, we are specifically honing in on the imported red fire ant. So we're going to talk all about this creature, its biology, and what Kentucky Keepers can do to help with this thing. So once again, the goal of the Kentucky Keepers program is to learn about and monitor for invasive species. So we want you guys, that means 4-H leaders and 4-Hers themselves, to learn about invasive species, also teach other people about invasive species, and to actually help us monitor invasive species using GPS technology. So a few reminders about what an invasive species is and what invasive species have in common. So invasive species can be all kinds of different things. They can be plants or animals, but they usually have some things in common. They are going to be new to an area. They have come from another country or another continent most of the time, and they've only been around for a few years. A lot of invasive species tend to breed fast. They have lots of babies or they have lots of seeds, so they're able to spread quickly. They are often able to take resources from local plants or animals, like they might take nutrients in the soil, or they might steal shade from other plants if they're an invasive plant. They might take hiding places or food from other animals if they're an animal, or they might actually even eat native animals. And often, because these invasive species are from a new area, the local creatures are simply not adapted to kill them. So if it's an invasive plant, maybe the local plant eaters just can't eat that plant. Or if it's a new invasive animal, none of the predators around in that new place are able to hunt it. So those are some of the things that they tend to have in common. But the official definition is that an invasive species is an organism that causes ecological or economic harm in a new environment where it is not native. So this is a reminder of why we need 4-Hers to help with the Kentucky Keepers program. So Kentucky just happens to be a place where a lot of invasive species are coming right now. A lot of these creatures have arrived either in the last 10 or 20 years or are very close to us and may arrive in the next few years. So you see that there are some creatures there with orange arrows. Those are creatures that are not quite in Kentucky yet, but are very close. And then the creatures with the yellow arrows have already arrived, but maybe have not spread all over the whole state yet. So some of these creatures are very serious. The emerald ash borer and the Asian longhorn beetle are creatures that can destroy lots and lots of trees. Same thing with the hemlock woolly adelgid down in the southeastern part of the state. But today we're talking about the imported fire ant. So there's the imported fire ant down there. It has come to us from the southern part of the United States and has just showed up in southern Kentucky really in the last couple of years. We are interested to see where it goes next. So that's where the Kentucky Keepers come in. So what is the imported fire ant and why is it a problem? Why do we not want it in Kentucky? So this is the red imported fire ant, abbreviated RIFA. These creatures are native to South America. They showed up in Alabama sometime before the 1950s. We're not exactly sure when, and we're not exactly sure how they got there, but they were probably accidentally unloaded from boats that were shipping materials between South America and the southern United States. Sometimes boats use big bunches of soil as ballast to balance the weight of ships, and then this ballast is sometimes just dumped out when the ships don't need it anymore, and the fire ants may have been hiding in that soil. Since then, it's been able to spread all throughout the southeastern part of the United States. They've actually been in Tennessee for quite a while now, and Tennessee has been under quarantine, which means that it's difficult to ship certain products out of Tennessee to places like Kentucky unless those things get inspected first. But nevertheless, the fire ants have broken through that quarantine, and many colonies were found in southern Kentucky just in 2023. So these fire ants live in very large colonies with thousands of members. And remember how we've said over and over again that invasive species are able to spread quickly, and fire ants are able to do this by sending out winged queens that go form new colonies, sometimes nearby, and sometimes they can fly quite a ways away and make a new colony, so these guys can spread quickly. Another thing that makes these guys good invasive species is that they are very aggressive defenders of their nest. So all ants will try to defend their nests, but these guys are very aggressive about it. So it makes it to where very few creatures can get in and destroy their nests. But it also means they're dangerous to things that don't necessarily want anything to do with their nests, like cattle that walk by, or horses, or pets, or humans, where these creatures sometimes build their nests in lawns or livestock fields. We also have something called the black imported fire ant, which is basically the same creature but just a little bit darker in color. So this is what the fire ant is the most notorious for, which is stinging people. These fire ant soldiers are very fast, and as soon as they detect something disturbing the mound where their hive is located, dozens of these creatures will come out very quickly, climb onto the person or to the animal, and start stinging. So dozens of fire ants can sting a person or an animal in just a few seconds. This can be very dangerous to people who have a sensitivity to insect stings, like people who have anaphylactic reactions to bee stings can have similar reactions to fire ant stings, and you can get a lot of fire ant stings very quickly. So that could be really dangerous to somebody like that. But even as somebody who's not necessarily sensitive to stings can really suffer if they get stung by enough of these at once. The stings are typically very small, and after a shorter period of time, they will show a little white pustule area there. All right, this video shows what happens when a fire ant mound is disturbed. You will see that the fire ants come out very quickly. Please do not do this with your own hand. The person who did this was probably not having a very good idea this day, but you'll see they push their hand there and immediately the fire ants come up out of that mound. You can see that they're very small for one thing, but you can see that there's lots and lots of them, and they all start stinging as soon as they come up out of that mound and get onto a living creature. So this map shows the spread of fire ant throughout the southeastern United States as of a few years ago. You can see it's really spread pretty much all the way from Texas up to the Carolinas. And then it was known in Tennessee for a long time as well. And now, just in 2023, it has been found in some of our sort of south central Kentucky counties. This shows the fire ant life cycle. Remember that one of our goals as a part of the Kentucky Keepers program is to teach some science content, and life cycles are a big part of that, and all of our creatures and plants have life cycles. Every kind of organism has one. We'll start with the fire ants up at the top here. So the ant stage of a fire ant, the regular sort of worker or soldier ant, which is on the left here, just looks very much like a typical ant. They're kind of small as far as ants go, but otherwise there's nothing very distinctive about their appearance. But there's also what's called a winged or a reproductive stage. That's what we see on the right here. So these are the stages that are actually able to mate and lay eggs. Those stages only show up at certain times, typically in the spring or fall, and this is when the colony is ready to spread. They're ready to send out new reproductives to form new colonies. So the reproductive stage is the one that actually lays eggs. The worker stage will never lay an egg. They help take care of eggs, but they don't lay eggs. So if you're a reproductive, you will lay eggs eventually if you're a female. The eggs are very small, about 1 millimeter, and when those eggs hatch, and this is all the hatching and all of the larval stages in the pupal stage, all happens underground inside the colony where those worker ants are helping to take care of everything, just like in a beehive. But when that egg hatches, it hatches into a little worm-like larva creature that it doesn't do anything. It just sits around and gets taken care of by the adult ants. It goes through several stages. It sheds its skin every time it gets larger. It goes through several of these stages, and then eventually after that last larval stage, it will turn into a pupal stage. So this is very much like the cocoon stage of a butterfly. It's about 4 millimeters long. Once again, this is buried underground, but you can start to see that it looks a little bit like an ant. And then this pupa, depending on what time of the year it is and what's going on with the colony, will either emerge as an adult worker or soldier ant, which is going to be doing all the work in the colony but will never have babies, or that pupa will emerge as a reproductive, which will has wings and will fly out and mate and lay eggs. So what are local, state, and federal agencies doing to try to combat the imported fire ant? So one of the things that we do, as we do with a lot of these creatures, is that we have quarantines. So the places where fire ant has been found, they're put under a federal quarantine, which means that if you have things that you want to ship out of that area, like especially things with soil in them, where the fire ants can live, like potted plants, those have to be inspected first, and you have to get permits and so forth to say that you're doing the best practices needed to make sure that you aren't sending fire ants to someone. So that's something that happens. And as far as monitoring goes, we have public pest hotlines and Kentucky Keepers. These are people out there trying to look for fire ant mounds to let us know when they find them. And then as far as education, we try to show people how to identify the mounds. We put out marketing to let people know where fire ants are found and what dangers they might cause. We train industry leaders, people who might work in landscape maintenance, to let them know what's going on with fire ants, and just general awareness so that people know what's going on and why these things are dangerous and how to deal with them. And then control. Once a nest is found, you can get rid of it. You can go in with pesticides, and you can try to control it. And then a nearby area around it will be inspected for further mounds, and then those would be eradicated as well. So those would be our four main strategies for dealing with fire ant: are prevention, monitoring, education, and control, just like we have with all of our invasive species. Now, as far as identification of imported fire ant, we're really not going to teach identification of the ant itself. As far as I'm concerned, that's only possible if you have a guide with you to show ant identification and also a microscope so that you can look at these guys closely. Instead, for Kentucky Keepers, we're going to focus on looking at the mounds. So the ant itself is too difficult to identify outdoors without a microscope. It just looks like a regular ant. But the mounds are pretty distinctive. They're pretty big. They kind of look like somebody took a basketball and buried it about halfway down so that about half of the dome of that basketball is exposed, but then maybe somebody covered it with sand or very fine soil. So that just gives you an idea of the size of it. It will look like dusty, fine soil or almost sand, so it will be a large bald spot in the ground. The mounds are typically going to be in what we call disturbed areas, so next to roads, in yards, next to fields or in fields, places where there's not a whole lot of tree cover. These things are going to want a lot of sunlight, and they also are able to get into the soil better if it's a grassy area rather than an area with a lot of trees. So these are the kinds of places we tend to find them. New construction, new roads, possibly golf courses or lawns would be the likely place to see them. And so you can see a couple pictures of them there. They tend to be kind of this large brown sandy spot in the soil. So how can the Kentucky Keepers help to deal with these fire ants? So the things that we want Kentucky Keepers to do, we want you, whether you're a 4-H staff member or a 4-H volunteer or a 4-H'er yourself, we want you to learn and understand about invasive species. That's what you're doing right now. That alone is very valuable because you can, just in conversation, tell people about them. If you see these invasive species like fire ant mounds, you can let us know about it. The next step up from that would be to educate others. So 4-H'ers can teach other kids. 4-H volunteers can teach big groups of kids. It would be great if people would include, like, what if you did a school project or a poster about fire ants? You could get a grade on it and have a good content for a homework project, and also teach people about fire ants at the same time. And then the next step would be to actually help us to monitor for invasive species using our Kentucky Keepers app. So as far as monitoring for imported fire ants, so once again, don't worry about the ants themselves. If you see some ants running around, don't try to identify those individual ants. It's just too difficult. But you can use the app to report suspected fire ant mounds. Now, you don't necessarily need to go out looking for fire ant mounds. And it would probably take a long time to find one. But if you suspect that one might be around, like if you've heard someone talking about a very large ant mound that has ants that sting people, you can go check it out. It would be a good idea to take an adult with you. And of course, if you do see a fire ant mound, you never want to touch it, and you actually don't want to get close to it. You would want to bring an adult with you, take a picture of that mound, and then send it through the app to let us know where you found it, and then we can go give it a closer look. Keep your shoes away from the mound, take the picture from a few feet away. And if you actually see ants boiling up out of the mound, get away quickly and warn anyone who lives nearby that there are ants there that could be fire ants. So look for those mounds. That's how you guys can help. Of course, to do this, we want you to download what's called the ArcGIS Survey 123 app, which is a free app through Apple or Android. We've got a whole video that shows you how to use this app. It looks kind of like this right here. Now, when you get to the part on the app where it says Trap ID, those of you who've done the Spongy Moth project will remember that in that slot, you would actually put a number that goes with the trap for the Spongy Moth that you're putting out. But for Fire Ant and also Spotted Lanternfly and Tree of Heaven, we're going to put a different number in that slot. So instead of putting a trap number, you're going to be putting IFA for imported fire ant, so that goes before the dash, and then after that dash, you'll put a 1. The 1 means that you're part of the 4-H Kentucky Keepers program, and then pretty much just any 3 numbers after that. So basically any number between 1,000 and 2,000. And you can kind of make that number up, or if you could write it down so that other members of your group aren't using the same number in your county, that might be helpful. But really the number isn't too important as long as it's a 1 with 3 digits after it of some kind. So this video shows you how to download, install, and log in to the Kentucky Keepers ArcGIS app. So the video is about 11 minutes long. It shows you actually how to take a picture, to make an entry, and so forth. So please review that video. And for those of you who happen to do spongy moth trapping in 2022, you may need to refresh and update your app to make sure that it includes the new fire ant portion of the survey. And that's very easy to do. Basically, from the survey part of the page, you'll click back. You'll just go backwards one, and you'll see this screen here that shows the Kentucky Citizen Scientist Survey. All you have to do is use your thumb, pull it down to refresh, and let it go again, and it should say App Updated, and then it'll be ready to go. If you have any problems with this part of it or anything involving the app, please contact me or Carl Harper. So here are your main contacts for the Kentucky Keepers program. I can help with things like content. If you guys have questions about the creatures, if you guys want to Zoom with a group of 4-Hers and actually talk to me, I'd be happy to do that. And then Carl Harper is the one who's really behind the technology of how the app works. But between the two of us, we can help with figuring out how to deal with the app and any other questions about this project. So thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you in another one of these presentations.